Have you ever given your whole heart to a place, only to wake up one morning and realize they were quietly planning to erase you like you never existed? Have you ever felt that cold sting of betrayal from people who smiled to your face while sharpening the knife behind your back? And if that happened to you, what would you do? Would you walk away? Or would you reclaim everything they tried to steal? Tell me your thoughts, because this story begins with a warning I almost ignored. Now let me tell you my truth. Please take a moment to listen to my voice, because what happened to me was painful, shocking, and strangely beautiful in the end. This is the journey that taught me that even when others try to cut your roots, your spirit can rise stronger than ever. My name is Mira Tallfeather. I am 38 years old, born in the plains of South Dakota but now living in Nevada, working as a senior systems architect at Riverspan Technologies, a place I once believed would honor the work I poured into it. For nearly 9 years, I kept the gears turning inside that company's beating heart. I built their predictive engine from the ground up, shaped their security systems, and patched the mistakes that others quietly swept under the rug. I gave Riverspan the kind of loyalty you only give when you come from a place where your word means something. But on a cold Tuesday morning, while sipping the same bitter company coffee I had tolerated for years, I noticed something that made my pulse tighten. My name was missing from a renewal draft for a patent that I had personally written, reviewed, and fought to protect. It did not feel like a mistake. It felt like a shadow passing over my shoulder. The next morning, I went to my usual little cafe, trying to settle the unease twisting in my chest. Sam Redwillow, the old cafe cook who had known me since I was 19, walked out from the kitchen with the same steady gait he always carried, but his eyes were sharper than usual. He leaned close and lowered his voice, saying, "Little Hawk, do not step inside that building today." His words sank into me like a stone dropped into still water. Sam was not a man of drama. If he warned you, it meant something was already burning beneath the surface. I trusted him. For once, I listened. I drove to the Riverspan parking lot, stayed inside my car, and watched as human resources walked in with a folder that had my name printed on it, followed by a transition team I had never seen before. Resentment rose slowly, like a storm forming on the horizon, and deep inside I knew this was not the end of my story. Sitting there in my car, I felt the first sting of betrayal settle into my bones, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had spent almost a decade building the backbone of Riverspan's technology, and if they were planning to push me out, they were doing it with a level of secrecy that did not fit the company I thought I knew. My heartbeat slowed into something colder, more focused, and I reached for my old laptop on the passenger seat. Years ago, before new management arrived, I had created a backdoor administrative shortcut for system emergencies. It had been forgotten by everyone but me. With my wireless hotspot running, I tapped into the building's security logs. The evidence hit me like a hard winter wind. My badge had not been scanned at all that morning. Yet the so-called transition team had already signed into my floor at 7:32. They were accessing sections of the department that only I used, that told me everything I needed to know. They were not firing me. They were erasing me. As the truth settled, resentment rose into something sharper, almost electric. I began replaying every recent interaction in my mind. The sudden closed-door meetings, the strange delays in approvals, the quiet whispers when I entered a room. They had been preparing this for weeks, maybe months, and they assumed I would just walk in blind and let them strip my name off my work. They thought I would not notice my patents disappearing from internal drafts, or the way my contributions were being reassigned to people who could not troubleshoot a simple system fault. I watched the front doors of Riverspan, feeling the weight of what they had tried to do. My jaw tightened as a new kind of calm washed over me, a calm that whispered of quiet storms and rightful vengeance. If they believed they could erase me, then they had forgotten the first rule taught in my family's traditions. When someone tries to take your place in the story, you refuse to vanish. You write yourself back in, louder than before. As I stared at the building that once held nearly a decade of my life, a cold clarity settled over me. They believed I was powerless. They believed I would crumble quietly. But in that moment, I realized something far more important than their betrayal. I still knew every hidden corner of that company, every legal thread woven into the foundations of the systems I built. If they wanted to erase me, I needed to find out exactly how far they had gone, and more importantly, how far I could push back. With that thought anchoring me, I drove home with a steady determination that felt older than my own heartbeat, something passed down through generations that believed in standing your ground with quiet strength. Inside my small home office, I pulled out the heavy wooden box where I kept all of my original contracts, patent filings, and the early agreements I had signed when Riverspan was still a humble startup trying to survive. Paper after paper covered my desk, each one a reminder of who I had once trusted. I began reading through the oldest documents, letting my eyes trace every line with renewed purpose. Then, buried in the pages of my very first patent agreement, I found it. A clause I had fought to include during my first month with the company, a clause management had always dismissed as irrelevant. It stated that patent ownership may be reassigned after the expiration of the internal non-compete, provided proper notice was filed within a specific window. My breath caught as realization settled in. The restriction period had ended exactly 10 days ago. The company had failed to file their notice. That meant the patents tied to my system architecture, the ones they were preparing to present to investors, were no longer secured under their ownership. They missed their window. I had not. A slow, steady fire rose within me, not fueled by rage alone, but by the knowledge that the story they tried to steal was about to turn back on them. And this time, I would be the one holding the pen. The moment I realized Riverspan had missed their legal window, a quiet spark lit inside me, sharper than anger and steadier than fear. It felt like the universe whispering that timing, for once, was on my side. I sat there with the contract in my hands, feeling my pulse slow into something calm and deliberate. This was not just a loophole. This was a door they never expected me to open. I reached for my phone, scrolled through old contacts, and found the name of someone I had not spoken to in far too long, yet someone who had once sworn she would always pick up if I needed her. Lila Rowan, corporate attorney, college friend, fierce spirit who never backed down from a fight worth taking. I pressed call. To my surprise, she answered before the second ring, her voice warm and steady, as if no time had passed. I explained what happened, every detail, every betrayal, every line of the clause they had overlooked. She listened quietly until I finished. Then she said, in the exact same tone she used when we were 18 and plotting bold plans in the dorm hallway, "Mira, we can fix this. But we move tonight." From that moment on, the night stretched into something almost ceremonial. Lila and I worked across screens on sharing documents, verifying dates, confirming ownership records, and drafting the legal transfers. I filed the paperwork under a new entity I created on the spot, Hawkstone Holdings, a name rooted in the strength of my ancestors. Every signature, every timestamp, every notarized submission felt like reclaiming pieces of my identity the company had tried to steal. By the time the clock read 3:12 in the morning, 8 of my core patent clusters were legally transferred out of Riverspan's reach and placed under my control. The entire technology backbone they planned to present to investors no longer belonged to them. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted yet steady, knowing that their attempt to erase me had just turned into the first step of their undoing. By the time the sky began to pale with the first hints of dawn, the exhaustion in my bones felt strangely light, almost purposeful. I stood at my window, watching the horizon shift from indigo to soft gray, and I knew that simply reclaiming my patents was not enough. Riverspan had built their entire future on technology they no longer owned, and while the company deserved whatever consequences came next, I also needed to secure my own path forward. I needed to place my work somewhere it would be valued, not stolen. That thought led me to a name I had tucked away in the back of my mind for years: Iron Peak Labs. Riverspan's fiercest competitor and the only company I knew had been quietly trying to reverse engineer my architecture for months. I made myself a cup of strong tea, letting the warmth center me, then sat down at my desk and drafted a single, precise message to Iron Peak's research director. I attached the legal verification of my reclaimed patents and outlined a licensing opportunity that would reshape their entire strategic roadmap. I pressed send. For a brief moment, I wondered if reaching out at dawn would seem desperate, but the reply came faster than I expected. Within 12 minutes, the director requested an immediate call. His voice carried a mix of surprise, respect, and unmistakable excitement as he realized I was offering something genuine, something powerful, something Riverspan could no longer touch. By the end of that call, Iron Peak's executive team had joined the conversation. Their tone was measured but eager as they negotiated terms, asked detailed questions, and requested access to the technology overview. What surprised me most was not their enthusiasm, but the dignity with which they treated me, acknowledging my authorship openly and without hesitation. When the deal was finalized shortly after sunrise, I leaned back in my chair with a steady, quiet sense of triumph. I had not only protected my legacy, I had given it a new home. Riverspan had tried to cast me out, but instead, I had found a higher ground they never imagined I could reach. Not long after the agreement with Iron Peak was signed, the sun had fully risen and the morning light spilled across my desk like a quiet blessing. I felt grounded, steady, and more in control of my life than I had in years. I was reviewing the final licensing documents when my phone buzzed. The caller ID flashed a name that once held authority over me, but now felt strangely small: Cora Flint, Riverspan's head of human resources. I let the phone ring twice, then answered with a calm that surprised even me. Cora's voice sounded rehearsed, overly bright, and thin around the edges, as if she already sensed the storm gathering behind my silence. She told me they wanted to schedule an exit interview to discuss my separation from the company. I heard papers shuffling in the background, the kind of nervous habit she had whenever she was hiding something. She insisted it was just a formal conversation, nothing more, and that signing a few final documents would ensure a smooth transition. Her voice cracked ever so slightly when she mentioned the documents. That was all the confirmation I needed. They wanted me to sign away my rights, my voice, and my history. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone even. I told her only 4 words: "You will hear from counsel." The silence on the other end lingered like a stutter in the air, and for a moment I imagined her pale expression as she realized I was not walking blindly into their trap. She tried to salvage the moment, asking if we could at least schedule a preliminary meeting. I ended the call before she finished the sentence. A quiet satisfaction settled in my chest, not the burning heat of revenge, but the steady warmth of someone reclaiming her dignity. Later that afternoon, I mailed my company badge back to Riverspan in a small envelope. Inside, on a single yellow sticky note, I wrote the words that would echo louder than any argument. Check the timestamps. When I dropped the envelope into the mailbox, I felt the first true breath of freedom. After sending the badge and that simple warning back to Riverspan, I spent the next few days in a strange calm, the kind that settles over you after surviving a long storm. I kept my phone close, expecting calls from lawyers, executives, or even Henry Locke himself, but the silence that followed was almost poetic. It told me they had not yet discovered the truth, and that ignorance was working in my favor. I had no intention of warning them. Instead, I opened my old laptop, the same one that helped me uncover their lies, and used a forgotten shared login that had never been deactivated. It granted me access to the company's internal investor materials, a space they assumed I no longer had any reason to enter. When the presentation loaded, my pulse tightened. There it was, displayed boldly across their pre-IPO deck. My original architecture, my system diagrams, my predictive engine, all listed as proprietary technology wholly developed and owned by Riverspan Technologies. Not a single mention of Hoxton Holdings, of the expired clause, or of the legal transfer that now stood like a locked gate between them and everything they had built their valuation upon. They had not updated a single document. They were marching toward their grand reveal with the confidence of a company that believed its foundation was secure. Watching it unfold was both surreal and strangely satisfying, as if I had been handed a window into their undoing. As I clicked through the slides, I saw Henry's notes in the margins, bragging about projected growth and long-term scalability. I saw Cora's reminders about their narrative, urging the team to speak confidently about their patents. Every sentence, every chart, every projected timeline was built on the lie they thought would bury me. Instead, they were laying their own trap, step by careless step. I closed the laptop gently, feeling neither rage nor triumph, but a quiet, solemn acknowledgement. They had chosen deceit, and now the truth would reveal itself without me lifting a finger. The morning of Riverspan's long-awaited IPO arrived like the slow rising of a drumbeat, steady and inevitable. I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of mint tea warming my hands, and opened the live stream that they had advertised across every platform. Investors, analysts, and reporters were already filling the chat with excitement. They had no idea they were standing on a fragile bridge built on foundations the company no longer owned. A strange calm settled over me, a mix of anticipation and quiet justice, as I prepared to watch the truth unspool in real time. Henry Locke stepped onto the stage wearing that familiar polished smile he reserved for moments when he wanted to appear brilliant without doing the work. He spoke about innovation, resilience, and the groundbreaking architecture that would define the company's future. My architecture. He bragged as if he had carved each line of code with his own hands. Behind him, the slide deck advanced smoothly, showcasing technical diagrams, financial projections, and the patents they falsely claimed belonged to Riverspan. But then it happened. Exactly as I knew it would. The live deck, linked directly to the Federal Patent Registry, refreshed. It took only a heartbeat. One moment the slide displayed owned by Riverspan Technologies, and the next, it flickered and updated to the truth. Licensed exclusively from Hoxton Holdings. Mira Tallfeather. The chat exploded instantly. Investors spammed question marks. Analysts typed frantic messages about legal inconsistencies. The hosts exchanged urgent glances, scrambling to verify what they were seeing. Henry froze mid-sentence, his expression draining into something pale and brittle. Behind him, the team began whispering, their faces tightening with dawning horror. In that single glitch, their narrative shattered. Their credibility dissolved on a global stage. I watched it unfold without speaking a word, without sending a warning, without lifting a single hand against them. They had buried themselves. The truth had simply risen to the surface. The moment the patent registry updated on the livestream, the entire presentation unraveled faster than anyone on that stage could recover. I watched from my kitchen table as Riverspan's executives scrambled to stall, deflect, and regain control, but the damage was already weaving through the crowd like wildfire. Investors began withdrawing their commitments in real time. Stock analysts posted immediate downgrades on the accompanying news feed. The chat, once filled with excitement, now churned with accusations, disbelief, and hard questions about ownership, legality, and potential fraud. The very air on that stage grew tight, as if even the lights were questioning the truth. Henry attempted to continue, voice trembling as he spoke about internal processes and temporary data irregularities, but each word only deepened the pit they were digging. Cora stepped into frame for a brief moment, whispering something urgently into his ear, her posture rigid with panic. Behind them, the team huddled together with pale faces, scrolling through screens, desperately searching for explanations that simply did not exist. They had counted on deception, and deception had failed them. Within the hour, the IPO was officially delayed, then postponed indefinitely, then put under immediate legal review. News outlets picked up the story with the kind of headline energy that companies fear and journalists crave. Riverspan misrepresents patent ownership. Critical technology licensed from external entity. Architect behind system not employed by company. The truth was spreading without any effort from me, unfolding exactly as it was meant to. That afternoon, I received a message from Riverspan's legal department requesting an urgent meeting, then another, then a third. I answered none of them. Hawkstone Holdings was already receiving inquiries from investors who understood the true value of the technology and wanted to negotiate directly with me. Riverspan no longer controlled the narrative, the patents, or the future. That evening, I transferred $40,000 to Sam Red Willow with a simple message: for the warning, for the truth. It felt good, not as an act of revenge, but as a gesture of gratitude to the person who recognized the storm before I did. In the weeks that followed Riverspan's collapse, my world transformed in ways I had never imagined. Hawkstone Holdings grew steadily as investors, engineers, and strategic partners reached out with genuine respect, eager to collaborate with the person who had actually built the technology the market now depended on. I kept my life simple. Quiet mornings, long walks, and evenings spent grounding myself in the traditions that shaped me. But even in that simplicity, I could feel a stronger wind gathering, one that carried opportunity rather than betrayal. 3 months after the IPO disaster, Iron Peak Labs invited me to speak at their annual Innovation Summit, an event attended by industry leaders, researchers, and policymakers. As I prepared backstage, I felt a calm pride settle into my bones, a feeling that came not from triumphing over Riverspan, but from reclaiming the narrative they tried to steal. When the host finally announced my name, the applause rolling through the room felt warm, not superficial, as if the audience understood the weight of the journey that led me there. Stepping onto that stage, beneath the bright lights and curious eyes, I felt the presence of every moment that had tried to break me. I spoke about innovation, integrity, and the importance of protecting your own work even when others fail to value it. I shared pieces of my story, not to boast, but to remind every engineer, every creator, and every dreamer that their voice matters. When I reached the end of my keynote, I paused, letting the quiet settle before delivering the message that had carried me here. Next time someone tries to erase you, remember that you are not a shadow, you are the storyteller. If they try to rewrite your ending, write a stronger beginning. The applause that followed was long and full, not for revenge, but for resilience. And as I left the stage, I felt a deep, steady peace. My journey had come full circle, not because I struck back, but because I stood tall. If there is anything my story has taught me, it is this: people may underestimate you. They may try to silence your name, and they may believe your silence means surrender, but strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet decision to stand tall, reclaim your creation, and rewrite the ending they thought they controlled. Your worth does not disappear just because someone else refuses to see it. So let me ask you, from one voice to another, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced a moment when someone tried to erase your contributions, your identity, or your hard work? Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your lessons in the comments below. Your voice matters, and I would love to hear your story too.